Welcome to CIFF Speaks, the official podcast of the Cleveland International Film Festival. I'm your host, Dee Perry, and I'm joined by Aaron Spears, who's co-host and producer of Cedar Lee Radio and the producer of CIFF Speaks. Hey, Aaron.
Hello, Dee, and hello, film fans.
So, Aaron, we have a special guest today, Jon Forman, who's president of Cleveland Cinemas and founder of the Cleveland International Film Festival. And, Jon, welcome to CIFF Speaks.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
So, we wanted to get to the origin story of that first Cleveland International Film Festival back in April of 1977. But before that, I wanted to get a sense from you of what the film landscape was like during that time. Where were you going to see films? Was there anything like the festival around?
It's a very good question, and I think this was a circumstance of being in the right place at the right time. While I was a student at Case Western Reserve University, I ran their very popular and highly regarded film society, the CWRU Film Society, along with some very good people. My successor, by the way, at the Cleveland Film Festival, David Witkowski, had followed me. But Case was doing the only interesting programming, I thought, offering alternative films, foreign language films, everything at that time that was independent was truly independent, as opposed to today. That seems to be a tired old phrase. But when I graduated, I had a couple of what I always referred to as real jobs in the real world, nothing to do with film. But then when I found myself, as one's supposed to say, between jobs, a friend of mine, Alan Glazin, who helped launch the first film festival, said, well, why don't you just, get off your rear end and do a film festival? There were a couple of commercial theaters in Cleveland, the Heights Art Theater, who used to show the Rocky Horror Picture Show, among other interesting programming. But very few theaters were doing alternate programming or a specialized program on an ongoing basis. So the environment was right, I thought, to attempt a festival, which, by the way, there was no Cinematheque. The new Mayfield Repertory Theater had not yet opened. The Cleveland Museum of Art may have been doing some programming, but nothing like what Ewing is doing today. There was a void, I thought, that was filled by the Film Society, but nothing accessible to the general public. Having said that, Case was always accessible to the general public, but you had to find your way through the maze of buildings to Dilbert Hall, to Strosak Auditorium, to find out where the films are being shown. And it was a great venue for films as well. So now, to answer your question, so I thought, okay, so let's explore the possibility of doing a film festival. And I am from New York originally, so I went ostensibly to visit my parents and had a meeting with the then New York Film Festival staff, who were kind enough to meet with me. And I said, I have this really wacky idea. We'd like to present the New York Film Festival comes to Cleveland, because I didn't believe that if we slapped the name of Cleveland on top of a film festival, it would actually work in Cleveland, which was an unfair judgment call about, what Cleveland would support. There was the Cleveland Orchestra, there was the Cleveland Ballet was just starting the same year. But I thought from a marketing standpoint, why not say the New York Film Festival, which had a pretty nice reputation? They said, no, we're not lending our name, where you don't do that. You can go ahead and show some of the films that we will be programming, but you can't call it the best of the New York Film Festival. So, one thing led to another. Glazin lent his marketing support, and the first festival was born. Although the first festival doesn't come close to resembling what's being done today. There were 8 films shown over 8 successive weeks, shown on a Wednesday and Thursday only, being patterned after the American Express credit card company had a subscription film series, high-end films, I can't recall the names, that was done in several theaters around the country. And if you were a card holder, or if you were friends of a card holder, you could buy tickets to these really well-done, dramatic films. And I said, well, that works, so why don't we pattern the Cleveland Festival after this, making it palatable? Because I didn't believe that Clevelanders would take successive days off from work or make a commitment to go to films Monday through Friday. Of course, now we know people take a week off from work and they spend the nights watching 40 films in a row, but I didn't think it was going to work then. So that was how the first festival was launched.
I wanted to go back real quick to, you mentioned the Case Western Reserve Film Society. The sense you got there, was it like the same groups of people you saw like regularly screening films there, or was it new people every film that was coming in? Like, did you just sense there was a crowd building around this type of films? Because that was also the European kind of art film was coming to America, and campus film societies a lot of times replaced art house cinemas. If you didn't have it in your town, but you had a campus film society that was really active, you could see some of these more experimental narratives and documentaries coming in.
It's a very good question. I think my sense was that while we were getting predominantly a student population to show up, there were people from the public, not only people who worked at CASE, but people who knew about the Film Society. It was kind of a little, we didn't spend a lot of money advertising it. In fact, we were not supposed to advertise because these are called non-theatrical engagements.
Oh, right.
You're not supposed to be competing with theatrical engagements. But the word got out through putting flyers around in coffee shops. This is all pre-social media, which, not to digress, but I also watched movies on celluloid. There was no such thing as digital. There was no such thing as even films were not available on tape either. So,
there's no home viewing or anything.
Yes.
Back then, yeah.
So I had a 16 millimeter projector and would watch movies in my house. I have a friend who had a projector. Because of my relationship with CASE, we would screen films on 35 millimeter at CASE. But I didn't think that Strosak Auditorium didn't feel to me as though it was an accessible environment for the general public. So we had to do something in the real world. And coincidentally, the man who owned the Cedar Lee Theater at the time was very generous and said, well, generous in that he agreed to meet with me, but he agreed to rent the Cedar Lee Theater, putting this festival concept out in mainstream Cleveland to make it accessible.
When did your relationship with Cedar Lee start then? So Cedar Lee was just hosting the event that you were planning at the time?
It was, I was very lucky. The Cedar Lee Theater I did not own that at the time. We rented it from a man named Burt Lefkowitz, who in many ways was really my mentor in the business. I was going to say he recently passed away. It's more probably about 5 or 6 years ago. But he was very supportive of the idea, but he charged rent.
Well, it's a business. So,
well, yeah. No, and I got that. And then the first festival comes and goes. It's relatively successful, or as I like to say, it was successful enough to pay all of the bills, but no one got paid. Everyone was working as a volunteer, including me. And Burt was divesting himself, his company, which was called Community Circuit Properties, I believe. They were divesting themselves of all of their theaters in Cleveland. They had some of the nicest theaters, none of which exist today because they've been converted to other uses. But no one wanted to buy the Cedar Lee. So he said to me, hey, kid, would you ever want to own a movie theater? And I said, Bert, I don't have money in my family. He said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I will essentially finance this theater for you. This is after the first festival, between Festival 1 and 2. Burt Lefkowitz said, if I finance the theater for you, you'll pay me essentially the equivalent fee of rent, but it's going to go toward purchasing this business for me over 10 years. He made me sign in blood, and the rest is history, as they say. It was very lucky. And then the Cedar Lee, single screen at the time, began to program specialty films.
Okay.
And this Cedar Lee, as you mentioned, was a single screen at that time. How did the condition of it, besides that, compare with what it is now? I mean, what did you walk into as someone who says, oh, this is my place?
This was a wonderful old neighborhood theater. The operative word here is old. It was in need of a lot of tender, loving care. This theater, by the way, the Cedar Lee Theater, was sitting in one of the so-called newer auditoriums at the Cedar Lee. The Cedar Lee has been operating continuously since the 1920s. There are many businesses that, there's a change in management, they close, they renovate. Cedar Lee never closed.
That first year in that first film festival, was there a moment during that where you kind of realized that it clicked and that it was going to work, or were you kind of just, because you said it was over a series of weeks as well, so like you kind of had some breathing room in between each screening week by week. Was there a moment when it clicked, or was it just kind of all panic the whole time? Or
there was a lot of panic, but it was very satisfying. And I can't remember the numbers, Aaron, and I should, but the theater sat at that point, the capacity was over 1,000 seats. But there were nights when it was, a third to half full. And it was very satisfying to look in there and seeing all these people who were taking a chance on some of these weird films. Bear in mind, there weren't a lot of people embracing foreign language films. They knew Fellini, they knew Truffaut, those are the heavy hitters of the day. But some of the stuff we showed was a little bit more obscure. And, there were years we showed controversial films. I remember, and I'll get the years wrong, it was year 2 or 3 where we showed a film called Taxi Zum Klo, a very controversial, very explicit gay film with some pretty explicit on-screen sex. And I had a very elderly manager at the time, a woman, and she looked up at the screen and she said, oh my God, because she couldn't believe this was being shown. She figured the police were going to come and shut down the theater. But the theater was full. So when those moments came, I said, you know what, this is going to work.
On the note of programming, I was talking with Bill Gensler and Mallory Martin late last year about the challenges of programming the festival. And I asked Bill, what's one of the biggest ones? And his answer surprised me in that he said it's trying to pick the right opening night film. And I wondered if that was true for you, if that was a big challenge. What do I start with?
First of all, since you brought up Bill and Mallory's name, let me just say that what they have done with this festival is absolutely remarkable. And I often tease them. Bill once said to me that he said, I'm really intimidated by you. And I said, the truth is, I'm intimidated by you because if I were applying for a job today, I wouldn't get it. These guys are really, really smart. I think his programming and Mallory's programming is probably among the best in the festival. I've stopped paying close attention to a lot of festivals around the world. I did when I was involved with Cleveland. But I see what goes on in the bigger cities, and I think what Mallory and Bill have done is really remarkable. But yes, Bill is right. You want it to be accessible. In an ideal world, you want it to be in English language, not subtitled, and you want it to have stars, and you want the stars to come to Cleveland. I learned early on that was very, very difficult, and maybe if you got lucky, the year we had Major League, not an epic by anyone's imagination, but it had hometown movie based in Cleveland, although only not shot in Cleveland, except for the opening shot with a panorama over the former municipal stadium. And we got stars because the studio's behind it. That was just luck. We showed a film called The Tin Drum many years ago as an opening film, and people really had a hard time with that film. A really good film. We showed Streamers with Robert Altman here in Cleveland, and people were really offended by this film that was very political. But, you have Robert Altman in town. That's really pretty cool. So,
And why in 1977 was F
for Fake?
F for Fake.
Yeah.
Why was that your choice?
Well, because it was available. And it was Orson Welles was behind it. And in my fantasy world, I said, well, we're going to get him to come to Cleveland. We reached out to his attorney. There was a very, very slim chance that he was going to show up. He did not show up, but we didn't say that until the very last moment. So people thought, well, maybe he's going to show up. We showed it because it was an interesting film. It had a name associated with it and the possibility of talent. I know that what Bill agonizes over is more and more film companies don't want their films in festivals because sometimes they feel that they're tainted. That said, there are companies that recognize the marketing opportunity of being in a festival and getting the word of mouth going. I'll tell you two quick stories about that. So last year, the Cleveland Film Festival shows RBG, and the film company contacted me, so we'd like you to show it after the festival. I said, no way, because you just gave away anyone who wants to see this film. I don't mind telling you we played RBG probably for 8, 9, 10 weeks, and probably could still be playing it even though it's been on PBS and every cable platform.
I think it was one of our most attended films of 2018, just attendance-wise period as well.
Yeah, so in that case, the festival did do exactly what it should be doing, exposing people to a good film, getting word of mouth going. The Mr. Rogers film too, same thing, similar experience. But there are aberrations with this stuff. Opening night films in an ideal world are more accessible, commercial, and they're not going to suffer from having 1,000 people show up on opening night.
So then that first year as you're doing programming, I noticed the few films that I could find that were listed as films that you screened in 77 weren't necessarily brand new films then. So you kind of had a bit more, did you have like some leeway there? Did you want to try to do some more classic stuff, or were you trying to keep it at least somewhat contemporary in the films you were picking? Again, there's no video rental stores yet. People really don't have access to this. There's, limited cable options.
Very good question. The marketing line we used in year one is the films the rest of the world are raving about are coming to Cleveland, or is raving about coming to Cleveland. I forget my grammar.
Sure.
These were films that already had U.S. distributors, had maybe played in New York or were playing in New York, hadn't been in Cleveland, but our hope was that the public would be aware of them. Nowadays you Google any movie title, you can read the reviews from the New York Times or Washington Post or wherever. But we relied on people who would read the New York Times, the paper, not the online version, because that didn't exist. And so they might be familiar with F is for Fake, or I can't remember some of the titles. Marketing was really our biggest challenge. How do we get people to come see these films that many people had never heard about? We were hoping that they would be good films and they'd be received favorably.
You just said something that sparked my ear. We were hoping they would be good films. So you had not seen the majority of what you were
Ooh,
programmed?
you were very good. I hadn't seen everything. I didn't travel to film festivals until after the first or second film festival. I really lost track of when I started going. So if some of the films I might have seen, but I would say probably, boy, you're challenging my memory here, but I would say I probably hadn't seen half the films. I saw them before they were shown to the public, but we had already programmed them. So if I made a mistake, shame on me. I was booking them based on other people's opinions, based on reviews I had read, and based on relationships that I had with the distributors who we were renting the films from. So I took a chance. And to this day, everyone says, well, they figure when I go to work in the morning, I sit down in a movie theater and watch. And while I do that, and Aaron knows that I screen stuff, I probably see only half the films that are showing at any one of our theaters, let alone once I got into doing programming for the film festival. It's really hard to see everything, and that's why you have the benefit of having a programming committee. Bill has Mallory has Bill, but they also have other people watching movies. They have screening committees for the short films, so they're not relying only on their own opinions, which, by the way, is unfair, because why should the festival be reflective of my opinion only? Because I may not like a film, you may love a film, and vice versa. So you really have to have a collaborative effort, I think, for programming.
Could you tell during the festival, over the weeks that it was going on, what kind of reaction you were getting? That is, people showing up in seats is one, but what were people saying about the films that you programmed?
People really liked it. I mean, and maybe I chose to hear that, but I really got the feeling that people liked it. I had no idea if it was going to be a second festival, although I have a poster in my office from the first festival. People said, you must be optimistic because it says first annual. Annual suggests it's going to repeat. We used the word because we needed to fill the space on the poster, but also I was optimistic. It really was. We're sitting here at the birth of the 43rd Film Festival. Never my wildest dreams that I think that this festival concept would last as long as it did, let alone turn into what it has become. I was a guest of George Guns, who was one of our founding board of trustee members, very generous, very nice man. He invited me to come to the San Francisco Film Festival, where he served as their board president for many years. And so I was there by myself on opening night as his guest at this table of all people in their black ties. I didn't have a black tie. And looked around this room, and it was filled with 1,000 people and drinking champagne. And I can't remember what the movie was, but I said, this would never, ever happen in Cleveland. So let's fast forward to probably around the 20th year, and people around the fountain at Tower City Center, and now at Playhouse Square, and filling up the Ohio lobby and the State Theater. It's remarkable what has happened here in Cleveland, and people who are eagerly waiting for the program booklets to come out, and taking time off from work. So it's really been remarkable growth. The answer to your question is, from the first year forward, the sense that people had an incredible appetite for this kind of entertainment led me to believe that maybe we could make this thing work.
And here we are.
Yeah.
Jon, thank you so much for taking the time to walk us through the paths.
It's a great honor, and thank you for having me.
To keep up with everything CIFF, visit clevelandfilm.org, follow CIFF on social media, or use the CIFF app. I'm Dee Perry.
And I'm Aaron Spears.
And thank you for listening to CIFF Speaks.